Hello, beautiful people. My name is Laurier, and welcome to my channel, Old Dirty History, where I like to talk about whatever historic topic, person, place, event, or thing that I want to talk about. And today I want to talk about somebody that I didn't even know existed until 3 weeks ago. And that woman's name is Leonardo Cianciulli. I'm really trying to pronounce her name correctly. It's Italian, and I'm not the best with pronunciations. I have a rap sheet of being bad at it, so just bear with me. But this woman is also known as the soap maker of Correggio. And she was more than just a little old lady who had a hobby of making soap. Oh, no. What makes Leonarda so special is what she used to make her soap, and today we're going to talk about it. And just a side note, because of my heavy interest in true crime, I was really shocked that I had never heard of this woman until a few weeks ago. I forget how I came across her, but I was just so shocked because I am a true crime fanatic. The other reason why I was surprised that I hadn't heard of this woman is because I also enjoy making soap. Yes, I like making soap from scratch. I'm not talking about going to Michael's and getting the little pre-base boxes or cubes of soap and then you just pour it into a mold with some pigment and some perfume. No, I like to actually do the whole saponification process. It's fun. I enjoy it. And so for a very small portion of time in my life, I was actually a soap maker. Your girl loved it, but I ended up stopping when I realized that I wasn't making any money off of it. In fact, I was losing money. So now I have boxes of soap that I keep stored in my closet. And so I never run out of soap, which is awesome. So unfortunately, my dream career of becoming the world's most renowned soap maker didn't work out as well as I planned. So I became a librarian. No, I'm just kidding. So combining my love for true crime plus making soap, I was like, okay, we got to do this. This is the next video. And finally, before I jump into this video, I just want to give a little disclaimer like I always do. So I am going to talk about cannibalism. I'm also going to talk about murder. And it's just going to be that kind of video. And of course, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button and the like button and all the buttons that they have to offer. And to the group of people who recently subscribed to my channel, I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate it more than you know. All right, so let's get into the video. Leonarda Cianciulli was born on April 18th in 1893 or 1894. It kind of varies across sources, but we do know she was born in Montella, a small town located in southern Italy. By the way, this area is freaking beautiful. I want to visit this place someday. It is gorgeous. And it's in the middle of nowhere, but honestly, I don't really care because I like to be alone sometimes. So this would be my ideal place. So when I looked up this area that she was born and raised in, I was like, how in the world do you start thinking about murder? You know what I'm saying? Like, if I lived in this area, all I'd be thinking about is beautiful views and Italian coffee and food. Leonarda had a rough childhood, starting as early as her conception even. Her mother, a beautiful woman named Amelia Dinolfi, was a young woman from an upper-class local family. Young Amelia was sexually assaulted by a local drunkard named Mariano Cianciulli, and this horrific event resulted in Amelia becoming pregnant with Leonarda. And to make matters worse, in addition to having to deal with the mental anguish of being a victim of sexual violence, this young woman also had to deal with her family and her community treating her as if she did something wrong, as if she brought this upon herself. I mean, their reaction was completely fucked up. Even though Leonarda's mother was a victim of sexual violence, her family saw this pregnancy as bringing shame upon her as well as them. They saw her as now being loose and impure. So in response to Amelia's pregnancy as a result of what Mariano did to her, guess what her parents thought was the best idea in the world to rectify this whole situation? They forced Amelia to marry this man who forced himself upon her, impregnated her. All I can say is when I read this, I just felt this overwhelming feeling of despair. I mean, it's just being a woman today is hard, but being a woman back then, especially in, some rural community in any part of the world, God, it's tough. You know what I'm saying? Like, this was was the 19th century, like the late 19th century. Women had way less rights than they do today. But just imagine being forced to marry your attacker and having to spend the rest of your life with him. And then also having to carry the child that came from this horrible event. So Amelia's family, they believe that she shouldn't have given her purity to this man. And so they believed that marrying her attacker was the absolute only way to make this right. This was the only option to these people. And even though Amelia's family forced her to marry this piece of shit, you would think that they would at least try to support her in some way, but no. Nope, they also completely cut her off, financially as well as emotionally. Amelia came from a pretty affluent family in the area, and so she wasn't used to living in poverty, and she was used to, living the high life. And to have that red carpet just ripped from underneath you because of something that you had no control over that affected you horrifically, it's just horrible. And your family just turns around and treats you like dirt. That I just can't even imagine. The situation was very dire. This man, her husband now, Mariano, he was a complete drunk. He had no money. All he cared about was booze. And so now Amelia finds herself in a situation where she has no contact with her family, and she's married to the man who is responsible for the most traumatic event in her life. And now she is a young mother by herself. So when Leonardo was born in 1893, she and her mother were forced to live off of the charity of others. Throughout Amelia's marriage to Leonardo's father, she suffered at the hands of his abuse for several years. And in turn, Amelia took her frustration out on young Leonardo, because to Amelia, Leonardo was a constant reminder of everything that went wrong in her life. She blamed Leonardo for all of her misfortunes. She hated this poor girl who had no control as to how she was brought into this world, never asked to be born and brought into this world. And so she is also becoming a victim. It's like just a cycle of abuse in this household. It was Amelia's hope that when Leonardo's father would die, and hopefully soon, since he didn't really take care of himself and he was an alcoholic, it was her hope that she would be able to find a new man who had more money, had his shit together, and also that her family would magically embrace her with open arms back into their family. However, when Leonardo's father passed away, Amelia's family did not give a shit about this. They were like, no. You're still the black sheep. We still don't want anything to do with you. Just back the hell up. We're not letting you back in. And so Amelia was very disappointed by this. And Leonardo, she was really unfazed by it because she never really had a relationship with her father. He was never home. He was always out drinking. And the only thing she really had of his was his last name. That was it. The only thing that changed in Leonardo's life was that now her mother was completely consumed with trying to find a new man who could financially take care of her. She didn't really care about Leonardo's well-being. It was more so just her, like, who cares about my child? I just want to find a man who takes care of me. And so Leonardo was left by herself at home night after night while her mom was out drinking and dancing and flirting with, all these guys trying to find somebody to marry her. But unfortunately for Amelia, the wealthier men in town, the more affluent men, they did not gravitate towards her. She was still kind of seen as damaged goods or lower class or whatever you want to call it. And so she was only able to really attract men who were like Mariano, real shitty, or had a little bit of something, you know what I'm saying? Like it wouldn't be the worst. We would still be struggling, but at least like we could pay some bills. Eventually, her mother did marry a man who was more financially stable than her late husband. Again, this didn't affect Leonardo. I mean, she still lived in squalor, and her stepfather, technically, he's her stepfather. He lavished what little money he had on her mother, and they just went out eating and dining and, dancing while Leonardo stayed home and was completely neglected. And of course, this toxic environment had a horrible impact on Leonardo's mental state. Before even reaching puberty, she attempted to take her own life. And to do this, she created a noose out of dirty bed sheets and she hung it up in the farmhouse that they were living in. Fortunately, Unfortunately for young Leonarda, she didn't really secure the noose very well, and so it slipped and came undone when she was attempting to take her life. This girl is still barely reaching puberty at this point, and she has just had such a rough life. I really feel for her.
I'm not trying to make excuses for this person because of course they're a serial killer.
But like we see this time and time again with a lot of serial killers where their childhoods are just really messed up. Not all the time, of course, but it's not uncommon. When Leonarda became old enough to marry, she saw this as an opportunity to get the hell away from her mother and her stepfather. So in 1914, she married a man named Rafael Pensardi, who was a clerk at the local registry office. Marrying Rafael didn't give her a glamorous lifestyle like her mom wanted, but she was happy. She chose this man and she loved him. But her mother, she wanted somebody higher up in the food chain. You know, she wanted a bougie son-in-law who had money. So when mommy found out that Leonarda decided to marry this basic office clerk, she was pissed because for a time she was really enjoying the perks of her daughter being this eligible bachelorette, because apparently in this community, in this period, the sins of the parent didn't trickle down to the child. And so Leonarda was still seen as like, you know, she's part of the bougie people. She's part of that upper crust family that her mother came from. I don't know why I'm doing this. What is this? What is this about? Maybe I've had too much coffee. That's probably what it is. And so she enjoyed this brief moment of just basking in the moment of being the mother of one of the most eligible bachelorettes in the community. She was going out fine dining with the parents of, you know, upper echelon sons who could potentially marry her daughter, accepting gifts and everything. So when she found out that Leonarda had already decided to marry somebody, she was pretty upset. Due to the abuse that Leonarda suffered from at the hands of her mother, the first few years of her marriage were really rough. Rafael was a really good, kind man. He really was. But Leonarda had suffered so much mental anguish from living in a household where she was never good enough. She was treated as if she was less than human, always berated for the smallest infraction, or even when she did nothing wrong. Leonarda always expected to do something wrong in their marriage, and she was very nervous all the time. She always expected the worst from her husband whenever she did something. She always felt like she was going to mess up. And on top of that, Leonarda was also suffering from seizures. We don't really know why she was suffering from them. We don't know what illness she had, so I'm not going to sit here and try to guess what it was. But we do know that she had a lot of anxiety, from what it sounds like, at least. No, you know what? Now I'm guessing. But what we do know is that she had a lot of mental scars from her childhood, coupled with whatever ailment it was that was giving her seizures. It was a bit stressful for her, and her husband, being the good man that he was, he tried the best he could do to reassure her, you know, girl, you burnt the toast, it's okay. Like, we got a whole loaf over there. If you burn it again, whatever, it's just toast, okay? We'll live. So eventually she started to really settle into her marriage, and, you know, things are going pretty well. However, her mother, Amelia, she just could not see Leonarda happy. So in response to Leonarda marrying this, you know, basic guy, this, you know, everyday guy, and probably just seeing her happy, which just pissed her off because she was a miserable woman, she cursed Leonarda. She cursed her marriage. And this curse would have a very negative effect on Leonarda for the rest of her life, because Leonarda was very superstitious. And remember, again, now we're in the early 20th century in a rural town in Italy. So curses were bountiful. They were everywhere. And so Leonarda believed that this curse would follow her for the rest of her life. And she was so terrified that she decided to visit this fortune teller to just, you know, get an overview on the curse, you know, a scope of how it's going to affect her life and her marriage. Normal stuff. Well, the fortune teller told her that you're going to live a nice, long, healthy life. You know, you're going to have many, many children, but all your kids are gonna die. Sorry about that. You wanted to know. I don't make the news. I just give you the news. I also read somewhere that the fortune teller claimed that she was also going to die in an asylum. So who knows exactly what this fortune teller said? All we do know is that it was not good and it really fucked with Leonarda. Although the fortune teller's reading left Leonarda shooketh, okay? She was shooketh. She went on living her life the best way she could. And even though money was very tight and they also had the curse looming over their heads, Leonarda and her husband wanted to start a family. After 3 years of trying, Leonarda became pregnant, but unfortunately within 3 months, she suffered from a miscarriage. And this just cemented the idea of this curse. Like, this was just like, okay, we're in the danger zone. And Leonarda and her husband, they were still living in the same community as her mother. They were still there. And so after this miscarriage, Leonarda believed that the only way to escape from her mother's curse was to move as far away from her as humanly possible. So in 1920, Leonarda and her husband left Montella and they never looked back. And over the years, they slowly put more and more distance between them and her mother. Until in 1921, they found themselves in her husband's childhood home, Laria Potenza. I hope I'm saying that right. I looked it up. I looked up the pronunciations this time ahead of time. Beautiful name, if I'm saying it correctly. And also on a side note with this town, oh my God, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. Just as beautiful as the first place, if not more. I really want to go here. I want to go to these random towns in southern Italy. Wait a minute. But look at these streets though. What the fuck? There's no way I could drive through a street that narrow. Like, hell no. After suffering her first miscarriage in 1922, Leonarda welcomed her first child into the world, and he was named Giuseppe. But even still, whenever things would go wrong, Leonarda would constantly be reminded of this damn curse. After the successful birth of her first child, she would suffer from another miscarriage. So in her eyes, Giuseppe was the golden child at this point. He was the survivor, the child that was able to survive the curse. And because of this, she became very attached to her firstborn son. And for a time, life was going very good for Leonarda and her family in this new town. They had no issues settling. Leonarda opened a small shop and she was well liked throughout the community. Her neighbors saw her as this kind woman who was a loving mother. She was kind of like the local wise woman that you went to for a palm reading or marital advice. But over the course of her life, Leonarda would have 17 pregnancies, and of those pregnancies, she would miscarry 3 and then 10 would die at a very young age, leaving Leonarda with just 4 surviving children. Could you imagine losing that many kids? This whole story just reminds me of Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife. Very similar situation. I'm pretty sure that Leonarda, I think, has more than Catherine does, but still, like, not only does it affect a woman's body, but also her spirit, her mental health. I mean, it's a lot to go through. So combining superstition with losing 13 children, Leonarda was very protective of her 4 surviving kids. So when World War II rolled around and she found out that her eldest child, Giuseppe, was joining the Italian army to fight in the war, she completely freaked out. Well, I guess freaked out would be kind of an understatement, She actually Ed Geined out. Am I right? That was terrible. Leonarda was terrified at the thought of losing her firstborn child. To make matters worse, Leonarda still believed that her mother's curse was a looming threat over her family. So what did Leonarda do to try to protect her son? Well, human sacrifice, of course. What else would she do? Obviously. From 1939 to 1940, Leonarda murdered 3 middle-aged women for the love of her son, supposedly for the love of her son. Her first victim was a woman named Faustina Setti, and to lure Setti into her trap, she told the woman she had found her a husband in Pola. She also advised her not to let anyone know about where she was going and who she was talking to and what this whole thing was. She wanted her to keep this supposed marital arrangement a secret. Unfortunately for Setti, she never made it to Pola because Leonarda murdered her with an axe.
You like Huey Lewis on the news?
After killing her, Leonarda dragged the woman's body into a closet and she cut it up into 9 pieces. As she butchered this poor woman, she collected her blood and she just sat it in a basin on the side. She was like, I got plans for that blood later. I'll get back to you. We're going to keep that on the side. For right now, we're going to focus on these 9 pieces that I've chopped up. She then took the pieces of Seti's body and threw it into a pot with caustic soda, also known as sodium hydroxide. Sodium hydroxide is an ingredient that's used to make a lot of things: glass, paper, detergents, but it's also used to make soap. And actually, it's a necessary ingredient for making soap. And Leonarda had some of this stuff on hand because she purchased it with the intent to make soap, but instead, she combined it with her first victim's body and waited for the mixture to dissolve it until all the pieces turned into nothing but thick, dark mush. She then took that mush and she put it into a septic tank, and then she put the rest of the mush into these different containers to dispose of. Oh, and I can't forget to mention what she did with the blood she collected. After Miss Leonarda waited for the blood to coagulate, she then dried it in the oven and grounded it until it looked like a seasoning you would find at Trader Joe's. She mixed her special seasoning into actual ingredients like milk, flour, sugar, eggs, and she did this so that she could make tea cakes. And not only did she feed these tea cakes to her son and ate them herself, but she also fed them to her guests. Just imagine the little old lady who you befriended from down the street gets arrested and you find out that she's been feeding you people cakes. See, this is why I don't eat food that people make. Potlucks are like a nightmare for me. If I can't see your house, I don't know how you live in, I don't know how you cook that. I don't know if you itched your ass and then put your hand in the bowl.
Save that guy for later.
I'm not eating it. And because of that same reason, I barely eat out, period. Call me bougie, call me whatever you want. I'm just funny like that. Leonarda felt like her first victim just wasn't enough to ensure her son's safety. To collect more unwilling sacrifices, she promised a job to a woman named Francesca Soavi. Leonarda told Francesca that she would work at an all-girls school in Piacenza. Francesca left home in the morning of September 5th in 1940, and when Francesca arrived, Leonarda, she proceeded to attack her in a similar fashion to her first victim. And that was Murder, She Wrote for victim number 2. Her third and final victim was a woman named Virginia Cacioppo. Virginia was a 53-year-old former opera singer. She had found herself now living in poverty, and she would frequently reminisce about the good old days, her glory days when she was an opera singer living in the lap of luxury. So to lure Virginia, Leonarda told her she had a job waiting for her in Florence. She would be a secretary for some theater impresario, which apparently an impresario is a person who organizes concerts, plays, and other theatric events. Leonarda advised Virginia to tell no one where she was going or what she was doing. And for Virginia, this was a dream come true. Leonarda is dangling this dream job, which is really like a carrot on a string, just right in front of Virginia. And so Virginia took the bait. And remember, Leonarda had built a rapport with this community, with her neighbors. She was seen as the nice old lady from down the street, so Virginia trusted her, just like the other women. On September 30th in 1940, Virginia arrived at Leonarda's home where she would meet the same fate as the 2 women before her. While describing what she did to Virginia, Leonarda was documented as stating, quote, "She ended up in the pot like the other 2. Her flesh was fat and white, and when it had melted, I added a bottle of cologne, and after a long time on the boil, I was able to make some most acceptable creamy soap. I gave bars to neighbors and acquaintances. The cakes too were better. That woman was really sweet." Okay, lady, sure. She was really sweet, I'm sure. So essentially, Leonarda is describing turning this woman into bars of soap and tea cakes. And due to her soap making escapades, she acquired the pseudonym, the Soap Maker of Correggio. Leonardo's decision to pursue Virginia, it ultimately led to her downfall. When Virginia went missing, her sister-in-law became very suspicious and worried. She went around town asking questions if anyone had seen her sister-in-law, but she just kept hitting dead ends until someone witnessed Virginia entering Leonardo's home and never leaving. And everyone in town knew Leonardo was the person you went to for a palm reading, advice, whatever. This woman was always giving out free soap and cakes. After a short but creepy visit to Leonardo's house, Virginia's sister-in-law went straight to the police. And once the police became involved, it didn't really take authorities long to figure out what was going on. Leonardo was brought in by the police for questioning, but she refused to give up any information, of course. So the police had to start from square one. The first piece of evidence that they obtained were letters that these women sent to their families prior to their departure. Before murdering these women, Leonardo advised all of them to write letters to friends and family members to assure them that I'm safe, I'm good, I'm happy, everything is working out just fine. She then advised the women to give her the letters and told them that she would send them off for them. But instead, she didn't send them out right away. Her plan was actually to keep these letters and send them out over time after she murdered all of these women, making their friends and family believe that they were just fine in their own handwriting. When the police tracked down these letters and postcards to the post office, they were confident that Leonardo sent these letters out. However, what they found was something completely different. They found that, in fact, her son, Giuseppe, was the one who sent these letters out. All right, so I had to change rooms. So sorry for the background, not trying to confuse anybody. It was getting a little too loud out there, so I had to head to my bedroom. So anyway, so now the police are looking at her son, Giuseppe. But obviously, we know now that it wasn't Giuseppe, it was his mom. But they didn't know this at the time. So even though they are going after the wrong person now, at the same time, this information gave them the ability to go and check out their house and the shop, snoop and see if they could find some suspicious stuff. And they found something, that's for sure. In Leonardo's home, they found a closet where she had stored all of the clothing and belongings of the 3 women that she murdered. They also found a drawer that had all of the jewelry and the money that Virginia owned. Leonardo hadn't gotten around to selling it just yet, which I'm trying to figure out, where do you go to sell that stuff? Because you're in this tiny town, and if you look at Google Maps, it really is in the middle of nowhere. Who do you go to and try not to get caught to sell this stuff? What pawn shop do you go to? I'm just curious. So at this point, the police went from thinking they were dealing with a missing persons case to, okay, we are definitely dealing with a murder case here. However, the police still believed that her son Giuseppe was the culprit. And remember, Giuseppe is the apple of Leonardo's eye. That's her little boy. And so she is not gonna let him take the fall for something she did. So Leonardo went back to the police station ready to confess to everything to ensure her son's freedom. At first, the officers saw her as like this adorable little joke, oh, look at this old lady who's trying to protect her son. Of course she's gonna try to protect her son and take the fall. What mom wouldn't? My mom would do the same thing if I murdered 3 women and chopped them up and made them into people cakes, and people soap. That was until Leonardo went into gruesome detail as to how she lured these women, how she murdered them, and then what she did with their bodies. So after speaking to Leonardo, they went back to visit her son Giuseppe, and they're hoping, okay, this woman is just off her rocker. There's no way this is true. Her son had to be the one to kill him, and this woman is just nuts. But when the police go to visit Giuseppe and they start going over all of the horrible shit that his mom described that she did, he is freaked the fuck out. He began to violently vomit as they went through all the gory details. And so the pieces started to really come together for Giuseppe. And he's like, wait a minute, my mom is extremely superstitious. She is obsessed with this goddamn curse that my grandmama put on us. And she's really into the occult. He's mortified. He is mortified when he learns that he has literally been eating people cakes and bathing in people soap. So after speaking to Giuseppe and Leonardo going through all the gory details, she was incarcerated. And so when Giuseppe's military enlistment rolled around and he had to leave, he did not even bother to stop at the jail to visit his mama and say goodbye. He was like, I want nothing to do with her. Actually, I want to get the hell hell away from this town as soon as humanly possible. Because at this point, he's living in the shadow of this horrible thing that his mother did. And this is a small town. Everybody knows what's going on. I mean, this is a town where not many crazy things happen. And so this is on everybody's lips. Leonarda, she was proud of what she did. She thought that she was a great mom. She did what she had to do to protect her baby boy, and she was serving her country.
Oh my God, stop fucking lying.
Unfortunately for Leonarda, the authorities, her peers, her community, they did not agree with her at all. Over the course of 6 years, Leonarda was transferred from jail to jail before settling in Reggio Emilia, where her trial would take place. And when her trial began, she just made a complete mockery of the courtroom the whole time. This was Leonarda's time to feel special, like she was the center of attention, because she's been kicked around half her life, as a kid, and just a terrible upbringing. And this has had a mental effect on her. Again, not excusing this behavior. This woman is a piece of crap. She took 3 innocent lives out of this world. No. And she fed them to people unknowingly. This woman is just going to be in the farthest depths of hell, as far as I'm concerned. But she was feeling herself, and she was loving the attention. She shared every detail of how she murdered and dismembered her victims, and she loved every moment of it. And whenever a family member of one of her victims flinched or looked visually upset, Leonarda would get more energized and excited about it. She fed off of their fear, off of their sadness. I mean, it's just despicable. She would also interrupt other people, and she would go on rants about how awesome she was at making people soap and people cake. It was a pretty frustrating affair for the judge, I'm sure. The trial lasted 3 days, and the court found her guilty, obviously. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison and 3 in a mental asylum. And she would die from cerebral apoplexy on October 10th in 1970 at 77 years old. I swear, stories like this just make you not want to trust anybody, not the nice old lady next door. Shit, I don't even trust my dogs at this point. I'm sorry, Tyrion, I don't trust you anymore. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This was a really fun topic to cover. Like I said, I love true crime and I love history, and I feel like true crime is a part of history. It is. These are historic criminal cases. And so this won't be the last time that I talk about a true crime case from the past. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye. If you or someone you know is suffering or has suffered from acts of sexual violence and would like to seek help, please call RAINN at 1-800-656-HOPE or visit www.rainn.org.